we are talking about biomedical research or health research. So this is a life cycle of health research or any research work. This is a process of any research work. So it starts with the spelling out of the research question. Okay. So after spell outing of the research question, we formulate hypothesis and objectives. After that only, after planning, analysis and then execution, and draw conclusions, formulate recommendations and inform stakeholders, and from there we again identify the data needs. Okay. So the first process of any research is identification of the data needs. From that we will spell out research question, hypothesis and objective. So today's topic is how to formulate a research question, hypothesis and also objective. Okay, so formulating research question, hypothesis and objectives. Of this research question, hypothesis and objective, this hypothesis or research hypothesis is mainly for statistical analysis, usually asked MCQ. This research hypothesis is mainly for statistical work. Okay. So what is this research question? Research question is an uncertainty prevailing in the general population for which the researcher is doing the study and trying to find out an answer. So actually it is an uncertainty or it is the data needs. Okay. And the sources of research questions can be all these areas. It can be in published literature. Thorough literature review will help you to find out a research question, or it can be new ideas and techniques. You will get that by attending research conferences, workshops, or thorough observation of the general population, prevailing beliefs, etc. and also imagination. The researcher should always try to roam his imagination so that he can find out some new technologies or techniques, and sometimes the guide or the mentor will also help you to find out a research question. So this research question is very important because the research question help you to get a correct study design, then helping in the data collection, analysis and also to find out certain conclusions, correct conclusions. So the spelling out research question is very important. Research question has two categories. It can be either a descriptive research question. There is no comparison or there is no intervention. There is only observations. Only observations to measure the quantity. There is no intervention or there is no comparison. And if there is intervention or comparisons to test a hypothesis, it becomes an analytical research question. Okay. So in a descriptive research question, it is mainly a prevalence study, descriptive type of studies. There is only observations to collect the quantity. There is no interventions or comparison groups. And in analytical research question, there is mainly the study design will be experimental or analytical, and there will be comparison group and also there will be interventions also. Okay, so this is for theory purpose. We can divide that into descriptive and analytical. But for practical side, we have different types of questions. The descriptive or research questions made from an observational study is usually starts with what? We just want to find out what is the relationship or what is the characteristics or what is the outcome of such and such population. So descriptive research questions are usually start with a what, and this explanation of this and also a predictive or interventions all are analytical research questions. So if there is an explanatory type of research question, it usually starts with why or how, why it happened or how it is connected, or it can be a predictions, okay, when it is going to happen. Okay, and if there is an intervention, we usually look for the impact of this intervention that is made in this population. Okay, so the question usually asked is what is the impact? Okay, so these are the verbs we usually use: what, why, how, when, or what is the impact of that. So whatever the type of research question, be it a descriptive research question or be it an analytical research question, there are common steps for conceiving or formulating a research question. There are certain steps for making a very good research question. I'll tell with an example. I'm very much aware that diabetes is a big problem in the society. So I want to do something in the field of diabetes. I want to do a research in the field of diabetes. So first thing, what is the first step? So first I want to do something about diabetes. Okay. So the first step is literature review. I want to I want to go through the state-of-art information about diabetes. The first step is review of state-of-art information. I reviewed a lot of information and I found out that this exercises reduces the blood sugar and also the body fat, and exercise also gives some immunity or protection against diabetes related complications. So I made a connection with the diabetes and exercise. Okay. So I thought I will start a research something related between exercise and diabetes. So next is to raise a question. So I raised a question: can exercise help to control blood sugar level? That is my question. The next step is, after raising a question, I have to discuss this with my peers. For what? Peer review is to know whether this question or this research topic is worth investigating. That is also important. Okay, so next is peer review to know whether this is worth investigating. I did a peer review. They said this topic is good for investigation, but this research question is very bad research question. So what I have to do? What is the fault in this? This exercise, that is exposure, and the outcome, the blood sugar level, are not, it's very vague. It is not measurable, or it is not definite. Okay. So I have to, then comes the fourth step, that is define measurable, exposure and outcome. Exposure, what is exposure here? It is exercise is the exposure, and outcome, what is the outcome? The blood sugar level is the outcome. So I have to define a measurable exercise and blood sugar level. What about how will we measure the exercise? That is whether it is jogging, walking, running, and what is the time limit, whether it is for 30 minutes or 1 hour, daily or weekly. Then blood sugar level, whether it is fasting blood sugar level, whether it is postprandial, and what is the achievable or the measurable limit of blood sugar, whether it is definite value or it is interval. Okay, there are upper limit and lower limit. Like that, we have to define measurable exposure and outcome. That we call it as an operational definitions of this. The next step is sharpen the initial question. With all this, I made a modification, that is, among diabetes, does physical activity for 1 hour daily help in reducing the fasting blood sugar level? So you compare the initial question with this, it is more sharpened. So the next step is sharpen the initial question. So this is somewhat okay. Again, the next step, refining the research question by adding specific details. What are the specific details? Like study population, or measurable definitions of the exposure and outcome, or the study design, etc. Everything you can. For more specific details you can also add. And also this can change according to the study design, whether it is a descriptive study or it is whether it is an analytical study. So if it is a descriptive study, we can change the question as what is the extent of walking done by diabetic patients daily in order to reduce the blood sugar level. That will be the descriptive question. And if it is an analytical question, that is the control of fasting blood sugar level in diabetes population, those who brisk walk for 1 hour or those who run for 1 hour as compared to those who walk for 1 hour. Like that you can modify the research question. So in short, these are the steps of formulating a good research question. That is a review of the state of art information, then raise a question, peer review to know whether it is worth investigating, define measurable exposures and outcome, that is very important, then sharpen the initial question and redefine the question by specific details. And so also there are some criteria for making a good research question. Your research question should pass the so what test. Okay, so what test? That is final. What is that? It should be feasible. Your study should have adequate sample size. It should have adequate resource. That is feasible. It should be interesting. If you have no interest in your work, then it won't do well. So it should be interesting to the researcher, the whole team, and also it should be interesting to the community. Novel. The idea should be novel. It should be ethical. Of course, you should get an ethical committee approval, so it should be ethical, and also it should be relevant. It should be relevant. Your information from the study should be relevant to the scientific community and also to the people or the communities at the community level also. It should be relevant. Okay, so anyway you are putting so much of your time and resource, so this should pass the so what test. And also the construction of your research question should stick on to the PICOT framework. PICOT framework should stick on to all these. All these should be there in a good research question. That is P, that is population, patients or the problem of your study. I is if there is an intervention or if it is an indicator being studied, that should be included. C, if there is a comparison group, it should be included. Outcome of interest should be there in the research question, and the time frame of the study should also be included. That is this PICOT. Okay. So remember PICOT and also the final. So regarding a research question, from a general uncertainty prevailing in the population, that is from the identifiable data needs, going through the 6 steps, come to a specific researchable issue. And this research question is usually written in everyday language, and you can use more than one verb, operational verb if needed. And also always link the question with an action that will be taken once the question is answered. Link the question with the action to be taken once the research is over. And also obviously it should be in a question form. Okay. And stick on to this final and also the PICOT framework. Hypothesis is actually an association between one or more variables. Example, smoking and coronary heart disease. So if you are looking for an association between these two variables, it becomes a hypothesis. And this hypothesis is not there for descriptive studies. Descriptive research questions or observational study, there is no hypothesis. And this hypothesis is there for analytical study. In experimental or analytical studies, we formulate a hypothesis after preparing the research question. And it is the researcher's best guess or assumption of this relation between this outcome. If the researcher tells that there is no association between smoking and coronary heart disease. It becomes a null hypothesis. Or if the researcher tells that there is an association and smoking is associated with the coronary heart disease, then it becomes an alternate hypothesis. Okay, so hypothesis is actually an assumption on the association between one or more variables, and it is actually the researcher's assumption or the best guess whether it can be a null hypothesis or alternate hypothesis, and this hypothesis is not there for observational studies. It is present. We make hypothesis only in experimental or analytical studies. And a good hypothesis is usually simple, specific and stated in advance. Simple in the sense there is one exposure, one outcome. Okay. And specific, it should be specifically stated. All exposure, outcome, population and study time, all these should be very specific as already mentioned in the research question, and it is stated in advance before starting the study at the time of formulating the research question. And usually these hypotheses are linked with the primary objectives also. So what is an objective? The next term of interest is objective. When framing the research objective, the common confusion is whether the aim and objective are one and the same. Usually this aim and objective are used interchangeably, but in ideal sense this aim is an ultimate goal which is a long-term outcome of any study. Epidemiologists advise to use the term objective for any study rather than using the aim. Objective and research question. We make objective from research questions. There are few differences between these two. The research question begins with an uncertainty or the need. I already told that. And the needs are translated into research question. And again the research questions are translated into objective. We write as primary objective and also secondary objective. And research question is framing a question by refining our idea. I already told the 6 steps involved in defining a research question. And the objective is actually, it is how the study is going to answer the research question. The research question is made by refining our ideas, and objectives, we write the objective as the how the study is going to answer the research question. Here we can use one or more operational verbs. I already told that, but here only use one verb. Which verb we use? First, you have to have a thorough idea of the type of study or the study design. If it is a descriptive study, or whether it is an analytical study or an experimental study. A descriptive study, we usually use the term to estimate or to describe. Okay. To estimate the prevalence of some disease or to describe the pathophysiology or something. Okay, describe. But in an analytical study, usually the verb used is to determine. To determine the association between smoking and lung cancer. Like that we have to use. So if it is a descriptive study, always use estimate and describe. Rather than the usual tendency is to write to study the effect of something like that. It is not correct. Ideally, if that is a descriptive study, use estimate or describe. That is a common term used. And to analytical study, that is to determine the association between the so and so. And in analytical study, we have to test an hypothesis. So always use the term to determine. Okay, that is, you have to remember that. And research questions are written in everyday language. Here we use scientific or epidemiological terms like estimate, describe, to determine, like that. So an example of a research question is, does physical activity has an effect on diabetic complication? It's usually written as a question. So question mark should be there in research question. Physical activity has an effect on diabetic complication. How will you change it into an objective? So first think of what is the type of study you are going to conduct. Whether this is a descriptive study or whether this is an analytical or an experimental study. Usually we need a descriptive study for this, isn't it? So does physical activity has an effect on diabetic complication? We are just observing what is happening there. We are not doing any interventions. So this is actually a descriptive study. So when I convert into an objective, what is the verb used there? To estimate or to describe, isn't it? So to estimate, and if it is an analytical study, you have to add the term to determine. To estimate. To estimate what? Effect of physical activity on diabetic complication, isn't it? To estimate the effect of diabetic complication, effect of physical activity on the rate of diabetic complication. Okay. Right. So this is how we have to convert the research question into a research objective. Hope you have got an idea on research question, what is hypothesis and objectives, and how to convert or how to translate research question into an objective. If you have got any, if you need any clarification, just inform me in the comment box. Thank you.